we are looking deeper into a warning being made by former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke, as well as one of President Obama's top economists, warning about the next wave of stimulus needing to address state and local funding. And our next guest has another warning to put on top of that when we think about jobs that will be lost if that stimulus is not reached. For more on that, joining us is David Cooper, Economic Policy Institute Senior Economic Analyst. And David, when we look at it, how big of a job impact are you projecting if we don't support state economies here with the next wave of stimulus?
Yeah, so I mean, states and local governments are facing huge budget shortfalls right now. When they're looking at what they're going to be getting in terms of revenues over the next 18 months, we project that they could be facing shortfalls of close to $1 trillion. And looking at that much of a budget gap, a lot of states and local governments are going to be cutting jobs. We estimated that unless Congress provides up to $1 trillion in aid to state and local governments, we could have 5.3 million fewer jobs in the economy by the end of 2021. And I should note, that's not just public sector jobs. That's not just state and local jobs. That's a lot of private sector jobs as well, because, of course, state and local governments spend money with businesses in their local communities, and the workers in state and local government go out and spend money as well. So we're talking about jobs lost in every state. 5.3 million jobs is a lot of jobs. That's as if, basically the entire state of Massachusetts and Connecticut were to lose every job in the state. So this is a potentially huge hit to the economy if those state and local governments don't get aid.
Yeah, we should note that this was kind of the results of you talking to bipartisan economists digging into this issue here. And we have heard it from a lot of bipartisan economists, even on our show, when we talk about how that is an issue in refueling the recovery. But what could happen here when we think about President Trump coming out earlier in the year saying that that wasn't necessarily he wanted to do because some people had mismanaged state level budgets? How do you think that thinking might change when you do look at the economic impacts and potentially, as you're saying, more than 5 million Americans not keeping their job if this gets worse?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note that this really isn't a function of state-level financial management. The truth is, over the last few years, most state governments have done a very good job in terms of building up their rainy day funds, getting to a better fiscal state. This is really just enormous, unprecedented revenue losses as a result of the coronavirus and the shutdowns that we've had to have. I mean, the truth is, state and local as I said earlier, state and local jobs support a lot of private sector jobs. And when we look at the job losses that we're projecting, a lot of the states that are going to be hit hardest are states that are predominantly conservative states like Kentucky, Alaska. We're projecting that Alaska could lose 5% of its total non-farm employment by the end of 2021 if this state and local aid is not provided. So this really shouldn't be a partisan issue. As you said, we have economists from all sides saying that we need to provide this aid, or it's just going to make the recovery so much harder.
Yeah, and when we look at some of the shortfalls here, some states expecting billions of dollars. We've heard a $10 billion number being tossed around here in New York from Governor Cuomo. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the funding and stimulus so far had been kind of limited to towns that had about 500,000 citizens there is kind of the cutoff. So, I mean, how out in the dark right now are smaller towns being left having to deal with the same issue of a loss in tax revenue?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they're facing unprecedented shortfalls, while at the same time, they're having to respond to a crisis like they've never dealt with before. If you look at the strain that's being placed on our public health systems, you have a lot. There was some aid provided in one of the earlier federal relief acts, the CARES Act, that provided relief for specifically responding to COVID-related expenses like expanding testing sites, that sort of thing. But there hasn't been any relief provided to simply offset this enormous revenue loss. And if you think about what it's going to take for state and local governments to be able to reopen and to deal with a potential next wave of infections, they're going to need more resources, not less resources.
No, for sure. And that's something we've heard from a lot of people, and now from you as well. David Cooper, Economic Policy Institute Senior Economic Analyst. Appreciate you taking the time to give us that. Pleasure.